Hospitals outsource medical transcription for various reasons, including potential cost savings and efficiency gains. However, this practice can introduce risk that could potentially affect patient safety, including contributing to medical errors that could, in some cases, lead to death. Here's how outsourcing can be linked to patient deaths. Transcription errors. Inaccurate transcription of dictated medical notes can lead to wrong diagnoses, incorrect treatment, inappropriate medication dosages, or omitted critical information like allergies. These errors can have serious consequences for patient safety. Offshoring and lower quality control. If the transcription work is sent to offshore companies, especially in developing countries, there might be less adherence to strict U.S. medical guidelines and potential HIPAA violations leading to errors in transcription that could be fatal. Lack of control and accountability. When outsourcing, especially offshore, hospitals may have reduced control over the transcription process and the qualifications of the transcriptionist, potentially impacting quality and creating difficulty in holding companies accountable for mistakes. In this new Justice in America Network TV series, our investigative news team is on location in Mobile, Alabama, reporting on how a typo in Sharron Juno's transcription resulted in her unnecessary death at Alabama-based Thomas Hospital. Sharron Juno, a 59-year-old woman and a diabetic since age 4, went to Thomas Hospital in Fairhope, Alabama in March 2008 because the access port for her kidney dialysis became clogged. At the hospital, she experienced some complications, so she stayed there for a week and was then sent to Mercy Medical, an inpatient rehabilitation facility near her home in Daphne, Alabama, to get her strength back. Sharron's doctor reviewed her medical chart and certified on a form the medication and the dosages she should take. He then dictated that same information for his hospital discharge summary without the physician's knowledge. The summary was outsourced to India to be transcribed. The summary was transcribed at 2 locations in India. The transcript that came back from India contained several critical errors, including a misstatement of the dosage of Levemir insulin the patient was to receive during her follow-up care. The doctor had dictated 8 units, but the dosage was incorrectly transcribed as 80 units. Sharron Juno passed away after receiving a dose 10 times what it should be. The jury's anger at the defendants, Thomas Hospital in Fairhope, Alabama, and the outsourcing companies it contracted with drove the $140 million verdict. The error was repeated in the admission paperwork the hospital sent to the rehab facility Sharron went to after her discharge from the hospital. The family of Sharron Juno, 59 years old at the time of her death, was awarded the largest civil wrongful death judgment in Baldwin County's history, $140 million. In this new Justice in America Network TV special, our news team sits down with the lead attorney, Finkbohner III, partner at Cunningham Bounds, and some of his team of investigators who literally had to scour the earth, including trying to depose the medical transcribers in India. Guess what? The medical transcribing company never showed up despite a court order. When outsourcing medical transcription, hospitals should diligently vet potential partners and ensure they adhere to HIPAA compliance, employ qualified personnel, and maintain robust quality control measures to minimize risk to patient safety. The key takeaway is that while outsourcing can offer benefits, patient safety must remain the paramount concern. Hospitals outsourcing medical transcription need to implement stringent safeguards and oversight to minimize the potential for errors and their devastating consequences. Skip has earned the highest respect from citizens and lawyers alike as one of the best trial lawyers in Mobile, in Alabama, and across America. His goals, not only to get justice for his clients, but to make sure that everyone is treated with equal respect and dignity as guaranteed under the Constitution of the United States. This is the Insider Exclusive, live from Mobile, Alabama. It is my great pleasure to introduce Skip Finkbohner and Glenn Garside. Welcome to the show, guys.
Good to be here, Steve. Thank you.
Skip, tell us a little bit about your law firm. What do you guys do?
Cunningham Bounds is a law firm we've been around since 1958, and we handle plaintiff personal injury, catastrophic injury cases, wrongful death cases, product liability cases, medical malpractice cases, commercial litigation where, say, a medium or small size company gets jerked around and cheated by a bigger company, and then mostly really significant injury cases.
You know, there's all kinds of law once you get your license, right? You could work for a corporate law firm, you know, make tons of money, you know, whatever, but you chose to represent the little guy. Why is that? What's in you and your background?
Fighting for somebody that doesn't have the power or the financial resources to get a fair shake on their own. You have to understand the people that we represent don't want to go hire a lawyer. The reason they end up coming to us is, and one of the first things they'll say is, I don't want to be here. Of course they don't, but they don't have an alternative, and we're their last best hope. And so that is, when that is a factor, and it always is with our clients, that you know that you're their only hope. And it makes what we do incredibly important and has a direct impact on their lives.
Although big verdicts, you know, which translates into big money, sometimes, you know, is kind of a just, let's say, end result for some of these cases. There's nothing that can replace the death of somebody, right?
Never, okay. Never. There's not a single person I've ever represented who lost a loved one, whether it's a spouse, a parent, a child. No matter how much money we've gotten them, they wouldn't take it all in a pile and shove it across the table if they could have that person back. They live with the consequences of that loss forever.
We're here today, Skip, to talk about an amazing case that, I got to tell you, I've done so many cases. I'm proud of you, you know, for doing this case and for the way it worked out. Unfortunately, Sharron Juno, who was your client, is deceased. Tell our audience a little bit about who she was and how this case developed. And let me say one other thing. This case can best be summarized by a typo cost Sharron Juno her life, right?
Sharron Juno was a very fine lady, and she had a son who, when we met him, was a young adult. His name is Bradley. Sharron was a diabetic and had some other health problems, and she went into the hospital and was treated there. When she was discharged, the doctor dictated the discharge summary. He also dictated her medication list, and because the illness that took her there took some of the wind out of her sail, he wanted her to go for 2 or 3 days to step up kind of a rehabilitation recovery. So that's that they sent her over there, and his dictation was transcribed, typed up, and was sent to that facility. And as a result of that dictation, they gave her an insulin medication called Levemir, and instead of giving her the 8 units that the doctor had dictated, they gave her 80 units.
80 units is a deadly amount.
It was for her 10 times, it was 10 times the dosage. And so she went into hypoglycemic shock, and it killed her. It damaged her brain, and it killed her. And the question was, who typed this up? We got the audio of the dictation, and the doctor clearly said 8 units Levemir. He said it quickly, but he said 8 units Levemir, and we could play that, and we did play it. So the question was, who typed this up? And that's what led to the long trail, which we can talk about if you want to get to that answer.
Absolutely. Now, Glenn, you were instrumental in this case. In what way?
I was brought in to track down former employees the medical transcription.
And they happen to be in India, right?
The first ones we tracked down were all over the United States. They worked remotely, through internet. So you could be in a state of Georgia, it could be in a state of Michigan, Wyoming. They worked remotely. So it's track them down, get their information, what knowledge do they have. They were award-winning employees, all their copies of all their documentation, their awards, and then Mr. Finkbohner and I traveled to meet with them and talk with some of them, and then bring them here to get their depositions.
Tell us what happened when you went to India.
Well, what happened was when we interviewed the people in the United States, they said, you have to understand that we were long-term 10, 20-year employees in the transcription service, highly certified, and then we were forced to train people from India to take over our jobs.
Forced by whom?
By their employer. Either you're going to get fired or you're going to help train these people and do their scoring on their accuracy.
Why was your employer forcing them to do that?
Cheaper.
And in this case, I think the difference in the cost was what, 2 cents a line?
I think it ended up, the charge to the hospital was 2 cents a line, and I don't know what the normal charge was, but it was a huge difference in cost to the transcription company.
When I first read this, it came to my mind Ben Franklin's poem, which is, and you're probably familiar with it, for want of a nail, a shoe was lost. For want of a shoe, a horse was lost. For want of a horse, a rider was lost. For want of a rider, a battle was lost. And for want of a battle, the war was lost. Everything is interconnected, as it was in this. The most amazing, you eventually, and I want you to talk about going to India, but the most amazing thing that I found in looking at those depositions was the fact that the transcription that came back from India was just unquestionably accepted. And you had a deposition on that too. Because it comes from some unknown place.
The people in the hospital, even the administrator that hired the transcription company, thought she had hired like Precise Solutions, and so we sued them and said, at first I thought the transcriber was in the hospital. I want to take their deposition. No, it's Precise Solutions. So I bring them into the case and say, I want to take the testimony of the person that made this error. Well, we didn't do it. Precise International did. So I sue them, and they do business overseas. I wanted to depose the transcriptionist. Well, we didn't do it. Well, who did? Well, we have a contract with Medusin Solutions, so we get them sued.
They were in Mumbai.
They were in Mumbai, and they said, well, we didn't do it. I said, well, who the hell did it? Who transcribed this in South Alabama? And they said, well, Samtech Datasys did. Well, where are they? Well, they're in right outside New Delhi, so I sued them.
And you had to arrange to take their deposition with the legal authorities in India, right?
We filed all the paperwork through The Hague.
And how long does that take?
Months, close to a year. I mean, this whole process took several years just to take the deposition of whoever made this error. And in the course of trying to find that person, we found out there were layer after layer after layer of contracts, and the hospital had no idea who it was doing business with. And they hadn't vetted the people that were actually doing the work. And God bless the doctor, he had no clue. He thought somebody that was in the basement in the hospital was typing up what he was dictating.
Well, let's say this, you tried to take the depositions of Samtech employees, right?
No, what happened was Glenn and I showed up, and the lawyers, there were a bunch of lawyers, the lawyer for the doctor, a lawyer for the hospital, lawyer for the rehab. All of these lawyers are over there, and we're in a dirt street, and there's a concrete wall around this place, and there's livestock walking in the street, and we have a magistrate, Indian magistrate, a judge, who goes up and knocks on the door, and he says, well, they won't let you in. I said, well, you're the judge. We have an order, and you have an order. Let us in. We get to take the deposition. They said, well, there's nobody to be deposed. I said, well, it's still, there's an order that allows us to inspect. And so these two thuggy-looking guys are on the balcony talking to him, and we get an agreement that they won't let us in with cameras. They won't let anybody in except Glenn and I, and we can't take any photographs, and we can't even take measurements. So we go in, and you can't believe this place, Steve. There were no computers on any desk. The computer hardware that was there looked like first generation crap. It was up on the wall with the cord wrapped around it. There was an eating area on the way to the work, and there was food all across the wall.
What is the food doing on the wall?
I don't know, but it was clear that nobody was working in there, and nobody had worked in there. And what we figured out was the people that were doing the transcription were doing it from their homes in India for this company. So it was then further subcontracted. So we found the homes, and those were shacks. These people lived in the slums of India, typing up medication dictation from a doctor in South Alabama for a lady, and that's how she ended up getting killed.
Well, let me ask you a question. The company here in the United States that the hospital originally contracted with, were they really aware of what was going on?
Well, they were aware because they had a sister company. There's Precise Solutions and then Precise Solutions International. So Precise Solutions presents itself to the hospital and contracts with the hospital. Then it contracts with its sister company, the international company. Then that company, in turn, contracts with Mumbai, which is Medusend, and Medusend in turn contracts with Samtech in New Delhi. And then Samtech in turn contracts with two people living in a hut in the slums of India.
So you went to trial.
All of that played out, and the judge allowed the video that was taken in the street when they wouldn't let us convene the deposition, because that's how you make a record. And Skip Brandon testified. We had hired an former FBI agent, former CIA agent named Carol to go over there and find the huts where these people lived and photograph it and all that. And the question was, how could you not know who you're dealing with? This, the hospital administrator said, well, I had no way of knowing. I said, well, has that changed? And she said, yes. So who are you dealing with now? And she said, well, she named somebody. And I said, what did you do to vet them? And she said, nothing. I said, even after all this happened, you didn't even ask what the competence and the identity of the people who were doing the transcription at the I said, you know, the doctors are relying on you to vet these people. And you don't even know. You're sitting here in front of a jury in a 2-week trial where this completely preventable tragedy happened on your watch, and you're doing the same thing again. And she said, yeah. And it really upset the jury, as it should.
You had asked for a certain amount of money in the case. How much money was that?
I suggested that the jury award $70 million.
Okay, and what was the end result?
On their own, they awarded $140 million.
And why do you think they awarded so much money?
I think they felt sorry for the family. I felt they empathy for the family. I think they felt empathy for the doctor, because the doctor didn't want that to happen to his patient. Felt empathy for the nurses, because the nurses don't want that to happen to the patient. And they said, listen, they want the institutions that hire these vendors to look at and vet them before they can do harm, because you know, you have to know who you're doing business with and whether or not they're competent to do the work that they're hired to do. This is not just typing up a memo from Skip to Skip. This is a medical record. You understand what I'm saying? And so the consequences of getting it wrong can be profoundly tragic. And that's what happened in this case.
Now, when you get a verdict this size, which I think is the largest verdict, right?
It's the largest medical malpractice verdict in Alabama history.
And still is, right?
Yeah, and it's the largest verdict in Baldwin County.
When you get a verdict this size, you got to think about collecting. Talk to us about that.
Well, we actually confidentially settled with all of the companies that got hit with the verdict.
Did that include the hospital too?
It did. And then Samtech Datasys, as you would imagine, just let the $140 million verdict stand. I think we recorded it over in India, and that's it. I'll tell you one funny story about that case. We got back from India, and I had taken testimony in Mumbai, and Glenn was with me. And everything's very formal. You know, India was a British system, so they have the depositions typed up, and they cover them with burlap and put seals on them, and then they have
the British way.
Yeah, the British way, and it's stamped with it's stamped with wax. Yeah, and then it's sent over to the courthouse in Alabama. And when it arrived at the courthouse in Alabama, they sent the package down into the yard and called the bomb squad from the FBI. And it was in the paper because they were like, this thing came in from India. We don't know what's going on. Well, the bomb squad opens it up and it's depositions. And one of the defense lawyers said, well, it wasn't the kind of bomb that they thought it was. They were scared of, but it was a bomb, all right.
You hear a lot about transcription is a big business. And it still is in India and other countries around the world. So how are hospitals vetting, you know, so they don't have this layer upon layer? We don't know what the hell the other company's doing. How do they avoid something like this?
Well, there has to be error review. You know, typically when there's transcription done, there's the next level before it gets sent back to the healthcare provider. It's vetted, it's reviewed, and there are standards in the United States for that. And of course, the hospital and then Precise Solutions said, well, the people in India are complying with U.S. standards. And then when I asked the people in India, they said, no, we don't. We're not complying with those standards. And which leads us back to, you know, we interviewed former employees that were really, really good transcriptionists, and they said that we did that for a while, and the error rates were through the roof, and we kept complaining about it, and we were told, be quiet. And one lady said, I complained so much they just ultimately fired me. So there has to be a review.
This problem, though, still exists today, isn't it?
I think transcription error is always a risk. It's got to be caught. It's got to be caught before it's actually used and relied upon for care.
Yeah, companies like Samtec know they're never going to have to pay this stuff.
They know that we can't get to. I mean, and listen, all they would have to do, I think they're still in business, or they've re-upped under another name. That's what ends up happening with you know, a company like that.
How has the hospital here changed their vetting process, or do you know?
Don't know.
Cost them a lot of money. They should know.
It wasn't cheap, and it was embarrassing to them too. I mean, the fact that they don't know who's doing the transcribing and it's being done, I'm the one that had to, you understand, the hospital administrator didn't know who was doing the work until I showed her the photographs of where the work was being done. You understand that? And I said, you're being informed, you're the hospital administrator, you're being informed by me where your transcription was being done. And you didn't know it except for us finding out about it and showing it to you. She said, that's true.
These are the kind of cases you get involved with all the time, right? Trying to find people, bring them to justice, get them deposed, right?
Find the diamond, find the needle in the haystack, do something to help it change for better.
A case like this, most law firms would not take it. Because if they did a little investigation, we're not going to India. You know, these guys are never going to pay. So why did you take this case? And what is the process here at Cunningham Bounds to select cases that they believe in? Because you pay for everything up front.
Well, we do. When the case came in, it was a medication error, a medication administration error.
But somebody's dead.
But somebody's dead, and we're like, what's the root cause of why this happened? And I couldn't get an answer to it. So, I meet with my partners and say, listen, come hell or high water, we're going to get an answer to this. They said, have at it, you know? And so it just kept taking longer and longer, and there were more layers and layers of stuff. I mean, everybody needed an answer to this. Bradley Juno did, the Juno family did, the community did. Hell, the hospital needed an answer to it too. They didn't know the answer.
But the hospital, the nurse that had administered it, didn't they know this was a deadly dose? 80
milligrams is off the chart, but not so far off the chart that a person that's working in a rehab facility that's not actively engaged in the intensive care of an active patient, they should have known enough to ask. You know, that was our argument about that. And she didn't. But, you know, she thought she was following the chart, you know. I mean, everybody's got 20/20 hindsight, but that's not a breach of the standard of care. You know what I mean? It's a fatal mistake that she won't ever make again. But it didn't rise to the level of the other party.
It's very unfortunate for Sharron. And you had tried a really, really good case. And I want to thank both of you for being on the show, and thank you especially. I mean, when you saw that 140 million, what was your feeling? What were your thoughts immediately?
I was surprised. I wasn't totally shocked. I was surprised. But look, when the jury came out, several of the jurors walked over and shook my hand and said, "Thank you, thank you." And I'm saying, "Thank you." Said, "No, thank you."
That's why we have juries.
That is why we have juries. And listen, that jury, that community, I don't know that had there been a malpractice verdict over there? No. There'd been a nursing home, one of my partners got a huge nursing home where they let a guy die verdict. But that's not considered a plaintiff-friendly place.
Well, anyway, thank you both for being on the show, and congratulations on the case.
Good to be here, Steve.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us. You can get more information about our guest and the issues at insiderexclusive.com.